the potential buyer being concerned about having to put up the cost of putting in a concrete lot, asphalt lot that our ordinance requires. I think one of the possible solutions is to maybe get a performance bond and give them X amount of time to put that concrete lot or asphalt lot in. That might make it a little bit more palatable for that buyer to buy that property. If they know they don't have to put a concrete lot in right now, but in the next 12 months or 24 months, they have to come back and put one in. It might make it easier for them to get into that property and open up shop. That might be a possible solution other than just giving them an outright variance and not putting one in ever. Because that's the option. They either put the lot in or we give them a variance and they never put one in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we're trying to get away from.
Yeah.
I think what we're trying to say is, hey, we understand you're moving in. We understand you want to open up shop here. We want to work with you, but work with us. At least make the commitment that you're going to do this down the road. And then if they don't exercise it, then we have it done and we go exercise that performance bond.
Well, we got to look at the idea too, because we're already talking to the person on Chelsea Lane of doing that, giving them a year to actually do that, mainly because we understand that, you know, you're getting started here.
I don't think Chelsea Lane was the one driving this. I think it was
Yeah, I know you're talking.
Yeah, Marquette, I think it's the fact that right as we were working with Chelsea Lane to
Just
find
another showed
an
up.
agreement on that, another one shows up right on its doorstep saying, well, the lot he's moving out of, I want to move into that, but I have the same problem. And in both those situations, it's what Commissioner Gainier was saying, that it's not like it's in downtown. It's, you know, I don't mean to be detrimental to, you know, to any of our downtown or to any of our city, but Marquette Street is not LaSalle Street. And so, you know,
The one concern I have, even though it is Marquette Street and it's industrial, and over the last 4 years, we've been trying to clean up Marquette Street. And if we don't hold them to the same standards as Adam's been knocking
Right.
on doors, trying to get everyone to clean up, I think that's why you're opening up different areas. I think we're opening up a can of worms. I think they have to be at the same standard. And that's just my opinion, Tom, but
No,
I just,
you're entitled.
as we're trying to clean up Marquette Street, it just makes no sense to then fall back and say, okay, but this doesn't account for you. Like, this doesn't matter for you.
Right. But even cleaning up Marquette Street, I think you would agree that we get rid of all the junk and a gravel parking lot would look much better than what's there now.
Right. And that we've been trying to make them put up fencing,
Right.
to put everything behind. It's not going to go away.
Right.
But anything we can do to make it look better.
Now, like I said, when I started this, I'm initially just against the idea because I think it opens up a can of worms. I think it further draws lines, makes things more confusing. However, I do like Brent's idea of having that trigger to be able to say, look, we understand we want to work with you. We want to bring business into town. Here is one of our qualifications. And I think the key, if we were to go that route, is to make sure that potential business owners know that up front. Like, they don't just immediately see it, hear the ordinance and go, oh, well, never mind. And hopefully, and I can say in this case, the buyer had their attorney contact us, and as long as it's being done in that capacity, then the attorneys will know enough to go, oh yeah, well, there is something that we can do to be more accommodating towards it. I don't think this buyer would have agreed to it anyway because they wanted to keep it a gravel lot, but I think it does allow for that trigger that we're all looking for as to how do we allow to be pro-business while not sacrificing an attempt to just better our community. I actually think Brent's idea is
Well,
Probably the
I don't have an objection to Brent's idea, but I think 12 months is way, way too short of a period of time, especially at like if you got a startup business is probably not going to be profitable for 5 years, which is about the average.
And we can, as long as we agree that the current ordinance is acceptable, we can work on the language of
Well, I don't
that
agree with that,
variation later.
That's okay. I appear to be in the minority.
And for clarification, it's not, there is no option for a variance. Our ordinance says you have to do it, and there is no process to go and get a variance.
Yeah.
You know, that was one of the discussion items was, did we want to build in a provision into the ordinance that allowed someone who was considering a property, as the example, to come in and request saying, look at this particular piece of property, it's in a blighted area or an industrial area, and that we could then later tailor and condition that they'd have to put in a parking lot in some period of time. As the ordinance stands right now, there is no process to get a variance. It's just either yes or no.
Maybe there should be a process to at least try to get a variance. I mean, we still have to vote on it.
Instead of variance, I'd rather go with Brent's option so that you're locking it. We're not making an exception, because I think that's the problem. We start getting into making exceptions for the rule every single time.
Somewhere along the line, we've already made exceptions.
Well, I know that. That's what we're trying to
I
stop.
don't think we've officially made any exceptions.
But,
Mine now.
yeah, but what,
Maybe this would be the time to bring it up. When would they be coming in for a design review meeting? Would they be coming in before they file any kind of permit request or whatever? I mean, they would come in and meet with the city with the second floor and have a design review. That would be when you'd go over all these requirements,
Yeah.
right?
and I also think that, I don't know exactly how to go about doing it, but I think with most potential business owners, making them more aware of the process ahead of time, so you don't have someone who's buying acres of land with the intent of doing something, and then after they buy it, then come into the city and saying, here's what I want to do with it, and then we throw on them, oh, there's this, there's this, there's this, there's this.
We've done that already.
That, well, I know, but it's
We're
still
running into
happening.
that right now.
But the reason I bring that up is in that design review committee meeting, that would be when the potential owner could say, hey, I don't want to put this lot in right now. And then we could say, well, here's your option. You can put it in later, but you're gonna have to pony up this performance bond and we'll give you X amount of time. I threw out 12 months, Tom, just as a starting point. It could be 24 months, it could be 3 years, whatever it ends up being. But the idea is that at some point, they come into compliance with what our requirement is. And that is to have a paved lot, because we don't want gravel parking lots.
Right.
Go ahead.
I have a question, I guess, and it's more for Christina. What if Dunkin' Donuts comes in and says, I don't want to pave my lot for 2 years?
The enforcement issue.
Or the
where you're
Dairy
going.
Queen, or, well, I mean, hey, you're going to have gravel parking lots all over the place for an extended period of time. And as I recall, and maybe a couple of parking lots that you're referring to did have some sort of understanding that they were supposed to be temporary. But there is no enforcement mechanism that I'm aware of. So I guess it's how do you throw that out there and say, okay, we're open to having gravel parking lots for 2 years and not give the option to everybody?
And if you
You're still being selective.
Yeah, and if you give that option, I completely agree. The mechanism by which to enforce the compliance to put in a asphalt or a
pretty
gravel
weak.
parking lot is at least difficult.
Well, one of the ways you can limit it is by zoning. If it's a certain zoning, they have to comply with the requirement to have a paved lot. If it was commercial zone lot, C zone lot, you could require that lot to be a paved lot. But in a D zone or higher, you might be able to give them a little bit more time. That's one way. I think you get around that.
Let me ask you a question, and I don't know what it's called anymore because I think they've changed name. The implement dealer that's out at North 32nd Road and 23, which is in the city limits. So are they now required to pave their entire lot?
I wasn't around during that, but I'm sure it's covered somewhere in the annexation agreement.
That's
If I had to
acres.
guess.
That's several acres they would have to pave.
But that's something that you can, through an annexation agreement that you can do. So I haven't seen their annexation agreement.
I haven't- I don't- I've seen it,
I know it's
but I
about to
remember.
expire,
Yeah.
but if you looked at that, that's probably how that was done.
But so, I mean, you want other types of businesses like that within the city limits? If you do, then we need to accommodate them. If you don't, then fine. But if we leave the ordinance the way it is, it will stifle development in the city of Ottawa.
Which is why I think it was pertinent to bring up.
That's where I think a variance comes in.
I'm not familiar with the one on Marquette Street as far as what the proposed use was. Or
I
the
don't remember.
proposed use is going to
Like what they wanted to use it for, I don't remember.
I just know it was a machine shed. I think there was
Right.
going to be some traffic to and from the business. I don't know if it was for repair of maybe small engines. I don't
Okay.
know that, but it was a machine shed of some sort, and they did intend to have some customers come
Yeah.
for
And it
repair.
was the idea, I do know that they wanted to put a Morton building on it, but they said it just wouldn't be economically, like it, to pay the amount of money it would cost to pave it or whatever, that cost wouldn't offset what the business would make over the long term, like to have like a small machine shop or something of that nature. Which was, again, that's why we're sitting here and bringing it up, is like, do we want to have someone who's, having a business like that in town? I'd like to think we're pro-business, but the other half of that is, we can't just continually be making exceptions for everyone who can tell a good story. So that's what puts us in this
Well,
situation that we're
I
in.
think we can actually, if there is a variance, I think we can actually look at that. I mean, because we, as a group, are gonna know that there's certain areas in town where we do not want gravel parking lots, okay? I mean, to put that down on a piece of paper and write a ordinance for it would be really tough, because you'd be looking at, you'd be drawing things out all over the place. I mean, there's certain places you'd allow it. Heritage Harbor's got a gravel parking lot, okay? Eventually, they're not gonna have one, supposedly. So, I mean, and I'm not, I guess I'm more favoring towards Tom. I don't really see, there's some places where you could actually have them in town, okay? Not downtown, not on 23, et cetera. But I mean, you just,
So the idea would be to make a modification, but put it in like a zoning, whoever said that, like, so that certain zones,
Right.
we follow the current ordinance, and then
Right.
for outlying zones, we have a different set of ordinances.
Right.
I still like the idea that there's some, I know it's hard to enforce, but some idea that there's something to help, at least with, off of the road onto a parking area, and maybe have an allowance for a couple years so that it's not straight off into gravel or something. I understand like the out north on 71, that you can't ask someone to pave
right.
6 acres of.
Right, you
property.
can't do
That's-
that. I mean, it's and I don't feel that we should ever ask Shakers to pave that other third of their parking lot that they're never gonna use just because we had the authority to do it. But I mean, there's some different places that it could be gravel, okay? And it wouldn't hurt a thing.
So basically, the tabling of this would be to figure out what areas we would want to zone inside and outside that ordinance. And then after we know that, kind of determine what the outside ordinance would be.
But I can understand a small machine shop. I can also understand the thing that was actually on, that is leaving there and going out to Chelsea Lane, which is not a big business, okay? And there's probably a margin there of how much money they will be able to make. I can understand reasoning, because the only person going to be parking there is the person that owns the place. So I mean, it makes, I don't know, it's a tough situation, for us to actually sit up there and try to figure out everything as far as it's concerned, and you don't want to play favoritism or nothing like that, but I think there was already favoritism played without our knowledge before, so.
Yeah, so I guess just moving forward with this one, I would say that we table it with the idea of figuring out what those territories are going to be. And then once we can have a decision of that, then we can start worrying about what the ordinance outside of that zone would look like.
But there is a downtown area zone and a Route 23 zone. Not when you get past Dayton Road, but basically through town, that really needs to be non-gravel.
Yeah, I would agree. Next one, hopefully a little bit easier. A discussion that
Nothing
came,
gets easier.
yeah, I know. Just a quick discussion on we have a business permit fee, and I believe it's $100 if you're going to open a new business.
How much is it?
$100, I believe, is the cost of it. And currently, if you are to, sorry to say it, this also involves the same person we were talking about of the previous one. But the question was asked as to why is that business permit $100 each and every time if they're just moving their business and it's still the same one? And just speaking from a fee point of view, I kind of would understand that if you're just changing your address on it to have a reduced amount to that. So I was thinking maybe someone that,
I can speak to that. Matt,
yes, I
if
was
you'd
going to
like.
say someone knew how it came about.
I do know how that came about. It was more a nominal fee. It's not a large fee. But the idea was, downtown, existing buildings, doesn't have to be exactly downtown, is that the business would have to register, come tell the city, hey, I'm opening up here. It would give the city an opportunity for the building official and the fire chief to go into the building before they issue that registration and see what's going on in there. That's really was the intention of the business registration. So if a business moves from one building downtown into another building downtown, it doesn't relieve that idea of going in there. But I see your point, they're already an existing business, why charge them?
Yeah,
It's not about the fee.
right. And it's,
So I guess
agree with that.
if you're still want to have the registration, the inspection, but the $100 fee doesn't really offset any costs anyway.
Right.
So if they're moving, you could waive the fee and there'd be no issue with that.
I was just curious of people's thoughts on it because to me, it was one of those things that was kind of a common sense, but without seeing the other side of it as to, well, some fee, yes, because you have to re-register where your new address is, but it's almost like you're starting a new business. So,
How close to when they open at the new address does the building official or fire chief or whoever go into the building, new potential location? How close to that date?
It depends how early the business comes in and informs the city of their intentions to move into the location.
So if they-
We'd like that as soon as possible, and a lot of times there's some modifications and some building permits required, so you do find out relatively.
I understand why you want to have them come in and look at the potential new location to point out problems. And they're doing the business owner a favor by, hey, look, your wiring's bad. This is wrong, or you got to address this egress issue because it's not in compliance with the current zoning. But I want to know how closely to that happen. Does it actually happen? Does the building official or the fire chief actually get into that building, into that business?
Once they're notified, I mean, as long as the access is readily available, I would say they typically get in there that week.
So if we waive the fee and just made a requirement, then we give them an occupancy permit after they get the inspection and all that, they can move in and operate and all that.
It depends on what they're doing. If there's improvements in there, then there is a building permit and occupancy permit issued. If there's no improvements planned and they're just gonna move in as is, as long as there's no like safety issues, then they're allowed to move in.
I would be in favor of waiving the fee, but still have the requirement that the building official and the fire chief or whoever be able to inspect the property. That's the driving force behind it.
yeah, and
Or it could be a lesser fee. It could be a lesser fee also for an address
yeah,
change.
and I mean, we still have to provide the service, and there is still I'm not suggesting necessarily that we would waive it, but I think a reduced one is considerable because, I mean, they're established business to some extent. If they're moving, we know they've been here, again, trying to promote business in our town. It seems like you want to keep that business in your town, so we want to give them a break. It does kind of, I completely agree with what Tom is saying as to the work is the same that we're doing, but I think there needs to be just a little bit of accommodating for our business owners, I guess. So that's why I would be more in favor of a reduced fee as opposed to a waived one. So it's almost like a compromise of services that are being provided. Hopefully, if they're moving, it's a building that we have looked at recently. I know there was talk with Matt and Brian about going back to doing inspections, of the downtown buildings again. So that would be another factor that I can already see the argument coming up is if the building owner's like, you guys were just here a month ago and now you're doing it again because I have someone moving in, that's going to be something that I think is going to come up as these downtown buildings continue to get renovated. So I think just to be accommodating, but also to serve its purpose, a reduced fee would be what I would be in favor of.
I agree with
I
that.
don't have a
Yep.
problem with that.
All right, so we will work on an ordinance, or we will work on a change to change that. This is more of an in-house one that I was told that Mr. Mr. Duttlinger had been asking about for some time. That we have currently with sign off of work orders, the limit may be too low
Yes.
and that it needs to be increased. And we just have never gotten around to doing that. And so I was asked to put it on the agenda as soon as I could to adjust that so that our supervisors and directors, and so it doesn't have to go as high as commissioners as it should for the dollar amount, which I think is $500 if memory serves,
I think it's more than that, but not much.
to go to a supervisor.
There's some conflicting language in the ordinance, I believe.
Okay.
What we've generally accepted is that in Public Works, anyway, is the superintendent's, yes, it's 500.
Okay.
The Public Works Director was 5,000, and the commissioners were 7,500. Whether it actually says that, Christina, I would leave that to you.
I think it does.
But that's generally where we've been.
And it was just asked, especially with costs and everything, that we move at least the $500 one up to something that most people think is more reasonable to not have to chase. Now I see why it was something that you've been asking about, because you would be the next one to be signing those.
Correct. And that's fine. It's just a signature, but at
Yeah.
the same time, I mean, it's an antiquated step that maybe doesn't need to be done.
We can always do what the state of Illinois did. They did raise theirs. So, I mean, I'll take NCAP for an example. I don't care if they're changing a tire. I don't care if they're putting tires on, doing an oil change and a couple other things. They actually have to call me to get the authority to actually do that.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking, there's a lot. And everything costs over $750 anymore. I don't care what you do, okay? So, I mean, they're constantly calling. And if it gets too high with us, though, I actually have to contact the state too and tell them what we're doing, but that's different. But still, I understand what you're saying is, $500 is not, for your superintendent or to spend that kind of money, that's hardly nothing anymore.
Do you have
Number in
a
mind?
number in mind that you,
Not off the top of my head, but can I think about that? And send it to the council
yeah,
and say, here's my reasoning behind that? We do have,
All the limits need to be increased for
Right.
commissioners, for public works director, and for the superintendents
Like all
or
the
the,
Yeah.
yeah. And I would almost suggest now, obviously, we have a contract provision in state law where if you're signing a contract, it has to go before the council, no matter what the dollar amount is.
right.
No exception.
Right, no exceptions. So, this would be only for quoted work or something like that, but I don't know why that a commissioner couldn't go to the bid limit, which I think is 20,000, correct?
It is
Correct, I'm
20,000.
looking at it now.
And then the public works director at somewhat of a lesser amount, and then the superintendents at a lesser amount also. But here again, if it's going to be a contract, it's still going to have to go through the council anyway, no matter if it's $10 or $20,000. That'd be my suggestion.
So the language, just so everybody has the language in front of them, and this is one section, and there might be a conflicting section that I don't have right at my fingertips, but a purchase order shall be signed by the department head and co-signed by the commissioner of the department for purchases in excess of 5,000 and up to 20,000. For any purchases originated by the commissioner of accounts and finance, the mayor shall co-sign.
well, and it's something we deal with in water and wastewater especially, is we'll order $30,000 or $40,000 worth of chemicals at a time.
Right.
And we have to have them, and we don't think anything of it, and we
You order them.
order them. Right. And so sometimes there are, bigger amounts that are just routine expenses that, that go on day to day. Now, Elena had talked about something in the accounting program where if there's $400,000 budgeted for chemicals for the year, you appropriate that amount and then you just pay off of that. So the whole 400,000 is appropriated, which I think is a great idea and could work. And
You've already approved it.
Right.
we've already approved the budget and approved the
I'll
400,000.
do that with the union.
Mhm.
I have a question. What about emergency? What's the authority on emergency? What can they sign off on? If there's the tornado, just for instance, you don't have time to, whatever, you gotta pull the trigger and get something in there. Public Works Director has to call every tree service they can get. Coming to town. You have to call in some plumbers or something, because one of the main breaks, and we just can't handle it.
The
I mean,
state
what do you
statute.
What's allowed per the municipal code, or what do we do?
What's allowed?
What do we do?
What's allowed under?
Yes, could be.
I'm looking at that right now, Commissioner, because I don't believe we have a provision in our code for an emergency purchase like that, like what you're suggesting, the tornado, for example, or there would be some other major natural disaster and we'd have to call in resources. I'll have to dig a little deeper, but I don't recall off the top of my head, and I don't see it right in this section.
Well, I could tell you how what happens. Okay. We actually can throw a special meeting. We don't have to actually put it 3 days in advance, which we have done within 5 minutes, okay? And made that decision right there on the spot.
There is a provision for emergency meetings.
Correct.
I mean, that's how we did
I'm
it.
just saying,
Yeah.
something happens.
Right.
and Tom's here, whatever. Tom can pull the trigger on whatever. We're gonna,
We could have a meeting within 5 minutes with enough people, just like that, and take care of the situation. We've done it before, and most of us, we all live in Ottawa, we're all available usually. If not, we accommodate each other. So, I mean, fast as we can go, we got it. We're okaying him within 5 minutes, basically. We can get
saying if
here.
we had a provision already in place,
Yeah,
if there was an emergency, natural disaster,
Mm-hmm.
and we had it in place, hey, Tom, you could, as the Public Works Director, you're authorized to go up to this level.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have to have that special meeting. We'd already have the authority to do that. So,
I don't know if is there a provision in state statute for emergency purchases?
Well, and there is one actually in our ordinance,
Okay.
and I did find it right here, and it's under section 2-513, and it specifically references emergency procurements, and it says purchases may be made or contracts awarded by the following succession of city officials in an emergency, okay? And it goes the mayor, the commissioner of the department, any other commissioner or department head. And it looks like if an emergency occurs which affects the public health, safety, or welfare where the amount thereof is not in excess of 20,000. So there's an emergency provision up to 20,000. Could exceed that in today's environment. And then the Commissioner of Accounts and Finance shall report any emergency purchases in excess of 10,000 to the City Council at its next regular meeting following said emergency
it worked
purchase.
out pretty good. I mean, we didn't have any problem. There was no delays whatsoever on anything that the ratio or the tornado, there was no delays whatsoever with our response.
I'm in agreement with Tom that the amounts have to be increased.
So,
We just settle on an amount.
Tom, do you want to get an idea of what you think that they should be from your point of view? Get them over to Christina in a week's time, so that way.
And it may even need to be just a little more detailed as far as by department, by,
Yeah.
public property doesn't have those kind of purchases usually unless there's a natural disaster. Yours does.
Yeah.
Utilities.
And in that way, if you get it to her in a timely manner, then we can get it to be looked at for the next council meeting, as long as we have it by Wednesday.
2 weeks from now.
Yeah, as long as we get enough time for her to put an ordinance together and for us to read it over and know what is getting put on the agenda.
And something to think about too, I believe, Christina, correct me if I'm wrong, that the state of Illinois actually went to $30,000 before you have to do competitive bidding.
I'd have to.
They went
I'd
from
have
20 to 30, I
It's
believe.
also 30,000 for counties, but they did not change the municipal code.
Oh, okay, so you
know.
can't, so the municipality can't change that, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't looked at that recently.
To tell you the truth, $20,000 and $30,000 is ridiculously low in this day and age anyway. They should consider raising that to probably 100, except for capital purchases. When you're purchasing a vehicle, you still go out for bid or something like that.
And Brent, I can tell you the last time the 16-inch water main on Joliet Street blew, it was a $40,000 repair.
Right. Well, that's something you gotta do.
Right.
You've got no choice with a sewer or water repair. It's gotta be done.
We can do it either way, if you want, up to you. Do you have any new business?
One quick thing. I think everybody agrees.
Well,
Is there any more discussion about this? Other than having Tom
Needs to be
report to
done.
Christina and
Yeah.
then we'll go from there and hopefully get something on regular council meeting. Okay, and then I just wanted to bring up one piece of new business that I forgot to put on the agenda because it's coming up here real quick. I wanted to get some feedback from everyone in regards to the Pride Festival. I have 3 ideas I'd like to run by everyone, and people can tell me if they like all 3, 2, 1, or none of them. Because of the fact that nationally and globally, Pride festivals are becoming more and more of a community thing. I was wondering if we would want to do a proclamation of June 10th, which is when our city's holding ours, that we could have at the next city council meeting. One of the things I've already mentioned, a lot of people as common in communities is, I've talked with Marla about it, about chalking Main Street with the rainbow, something that she said we'd have to do at about midnight to not get traffic.
3 o'clock in the morning.
Well,
Yeah, you know, to get it in place for the day. And then the third one being the inclusion flag on the flagpole just for on June 10th. So just wondering what everyone thinks about those 3 ideas, because we're running out of time to kind of think individually on it. So I wanted to do it when I had everyone here. So if anyone likes any of the ideas, we can start moving forward on it, especially the proclamation one, which would come up on June 6th.
I have no objections to any of them.
Perfect. All right. That's the only thing we all agreed on without any conversation. That's fantastic. All right. So we are going to now close this portion of it to go into executive session, and then we will come back out to close the meeting.
So we'll need to take a motion to go into closed
Yeah.
session, and then
We probably won't be taking any action though afterwards, so usually that's what we say, so that the media doesn't have to stick around and wait for all.
We will be doing no other business. I've been hanging out with him all day today. I'm sure he won't mind a little bit longer.
All right. Moved by Mayor Hennessy that this council recess into closed session to discuss matters of personnel and collective bargaining.
Can I get a second?
Second.
It was a tie. I'm going to go with Commissioner Pearson. Roll call?
Michael Kraut.
Aye.
Gainier.
Aye.
Pearson.
Aye.
Barron.
Aye.
Mayor.
Aye.
However, when you do that, because we have said that before and we've taken action, you should say we don't anticipate taking any action. Because we have come out of executive.
I only have this much room for.
You're fine.
All right.